I'm okay. I know it's not great in the edit, but
That's okay. It
it's
reflects what you do.
yes, lastminute.com.
Well,
uh,
that's the world of documentary, isn't it?
yeah, it's too much to do all the time.
Agreed.
Not enough hours in the day.
Oh,
Uh,
don't you don't have to tell me. I completely agree. I wish there was 48 hours in the day, but
Looks cool
it
your
isn't.
end though. Is that your office or?
Yeah, it's my office and a little bit of a podcast studio. I do all my post-production work here and just keeps me in the space of, cinema world, basically.
Looks cozy. Like it.
Yeah, it is nice, kind of away from everything. But it
Where
can be it can be daunting at the same time.
where are you based?
Toronto, yourself?
Toronto. In Bristol in the UK.
Okay. Yeah, I've been to
Uh,
Bristol. Yeah,
yeah.
lovely place. Yeah. Awesome.
Ah,
Well, thank you for joining. Appreciate it.
pleasure. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Really excited to chat to you about life on our planet. Specifically, I think you directed episode 5 and 8. Uh,
3 and 8.
3 and 8. Okay, 3 and 8.
Yeah.
Which they all were fantastic. I don't really binge watch. I take my time, but I was pretty much hooked from the very beginning. And I think I finished it on two different plane flights.
Wow.
It was just not, 3, 4 episodes each flight from San Francisco to Toronto, and phenomenal series. Really, really enjoyed it. Just want to say that up front first.
Oh, thank you. That's quite the marathon. I'm not sure I could sit through 8 hours of life on our planet.
Well,
That,
when you're sitting on the plane trying to find things to do, and if it's something good that you can watch, it helps. You can't watch everything. It has to be good, right?
yeah.
Basically. But yeah, no, before we get on to that, Sophie, I wanted to sort of speak to you about your career, how you got started, what your journey has been, and we will sort of take our path to the series and how you started working on that.
Mm. Well, my path was originally I wanted to be a vet, which I'm a failed veterinarian, essentially. I didn't get into veterinary school. And so I had to rethink everything when I was 18, and I was devastated because I'd sort of geared everything towards getting into veterinary college. So I had to take a year out, reapply to university, and in that year I went to Africa and worked on a game reserve, and I
Mm,
got really into photography, and I sort of then realized actually wildlife filmmaking combines these two worlds. They combines arts with sciences, and I'd always loved art, doing sort of drawings myself, and then photography because it was such a great medium. It's much quicker than like having to draw or sketch yourself, so you can kind of be artistic with light, and I really enjoyed that side of things. So then I sort of swung round and geared everything from that moment on to getting into the BBC Natural History Unit. And so I did a zoology psychology degree at Bristol University, where I knew the Natural History Unit was based. And I just tried to get as much work experience as I could, which was very difficult. But I got my degree, and then I went back to Africa for a year working with meerkats. Cambridge University had a meerkat project, and
mm.
they were filming. I don't know if you remember a series on Animal Planet called Meerkat Manor.
No, I
Um,
haven't. I mean, there's so many of them now. I haven't seen that yet.
so Meerkat Manor was very successful for Animal Planet, as it was a long-standing sort of docudrama, if you like, into the world of meerkats. And I got involved with helping the film crews, and because I had my knowledge of meerkats, I could sit there and predict what they were going to do, and I could take the camera operators to the meerkats and help them out basically. And then from there, I slowly built contacts in that world, and I got my first job on a meerkat feature film that the BBC were making, again, sort of employed for my expertise with watching and observing wild animals or meerkats and being able to predict their behavior.
Sure.
Um, and then slowly I kind of worked my way into the television industry, and amazingly with no training, like no, there was no film school. There's now specialist masters courses you can do in wildlife filmmaking, but at the time there was nothing. It was just, you know,
Right.
reading up as much as you could about, all the television formats, all the different cameras, trying to persuade people to let you kind of talk to them about the industry, about how cameras worked, about filming, and you just had to sort of be like a sponge and absorb as much of that information about how to make documentaries as you could in order to make yourself employable. So yeah, it was hard work at the beginning, but I'm glad I didn't give up, I guess.
That's fantastic. That's great that you had, even though you got rejected from something, but you still kind of kept your interest in a similar field, which is, obviously wildlife, animals, and kind of tapping that into from the creative angle. And I can see that now that you mention it, the amount of um I wouldn't say research, but if you want to say that, that sort of is seen in the episodes, in all of them, right? It's just that it helps with the director, obviously, too, when he or she knows what exactly they're tackling more than, because that's what their thing is, not just based on what research they have done, because that's what they have lived for a long time. And it shows clearly. So that's a really cool story. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
I just think it's nice to say that, from failure really comes something better, something greater. And I wouldn't have known that at the time. I was devastated, but actually for people out there, rejection can actually lead to something better than you imagined. And I think it's quite a nice story for that reason.
It is so true, and I realized that in the last 5 6 years too, and I always talk about this to my wife, that I've become so used to rejection that it's like one after the other. Okay, move on. Like you don't even dwell about it now. It's like, just let's just move forward. It is what it is. What can you do, right? So, and I think that's a good thing to have, to go through rejection, because it makes you pivot, it makes you stronger, it makes you teaches you to deal with things more, efficiently and professionally.
Mm. Yeah, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go again.
Yeah, there's no choice, or you can just cry and go do something that you hate and be miserable for the rest of your life. It's that simple. No, I know it sounds very bad, but it's that simple. Either you pick yourself up and you move on, or you're just, gonna be sad, and that's not the choice that you should make. Um, and how did you come on board on this series? I know you're part of a production house. Is it Silver?
Silverback
Uh,
Films, yeah.
Silverback Films. So I'm assuming you've done stuff with them before. So that's probably how you kind of got angled into this project. But how did your journey to Silverback Films came about? Like, when did that happen? Was it recently? What was the story leading up to that?
Yeah, so I worked it took me a long time to get into the BBC Natural History Unit, and I finally got in to the BBC, and I worked my way. It also took me a long time to get onto these big landmark series. So I knew I wanted to ultimately get a job as a producer on a David Attenborough big landmark wildlife series.
Mm,
But it took probably, I'd say, about 8 years before that happened. And I just made it onto a landmark in the BBC called Life Story,
mm,
as an assistant producer. And it came to the end of that, and I got a phone call actually from Alistair Fothergill. So Alistair Fothergill and Keith Scholey are the executive producers or CEOs of Silverback Films, and they have an incredible pedigree. They were both head of the Natural History Unit. Alistair was responsible for Planet Earth, Frozen Planet, Blue Planet. So he, that was his thing, the big landmarks. And he left the BBC to set up his own company with Keith. And they had a great series called The Hunt, which was another BBC David Attenborough series. And they were looking for people, and I just finished on Life Story, and Alistair gave me a call and said, we're looking for an assistant producer. We've heard great things about you. Why don't you come join us? And so it was quite a big dilemma to leave the BBC, having worked so hard to get where I wanted to be, but equally an amazing opportunity because I'd heard such good things about The Hunt and the footage they were getting, and I was excited by it. So I just thought, why not? So I left, and that was 10 years ago. So I've been at Silverback
wow.
10 years now, and Alistair gave me my first producing job on Our Planet, which was David Attenborough's first landmark for Netflix. So I produced and directed the Frozen Worlds episode of that series. So yeah, it's been an amazing place to work, and I'm really appreciative of being in a position to be able to produce these shows. It's really incredible.
That's interesting that you mentioned David Attenborough again. I was going to ask you, have you ever worked on a project where, he narrated, so obviously that answers that question. But what's interesting is, I mean, I'm sure you know about the series Prehistoric Planet from Apple, and he narrated that. And we have Morgan Freeman here. Did you because I think Prehistoric Planet came out, I think it's in its second season, if I'm not mistaken. I know my kids and I saw I probably saw the first few episodes, and then I got busy and I never got around to it. Had you seen that series at all? Was there any sort of,
Um,
they're two different series. Let's just be clear about that, because that's just about dinosaurs. This is about evolution, more or less.
yeah, so they are very different series. They were commissioned, I think Life on Our Planet might have even been commissioned first.
Mm,
So they take an incredibly long time to make these.
yeah.
And initially, Life on Our Planet was also split because Prehistoric Planet was commissioned as 8 parts, and it was split into two. And so they got 4 parts out, and now there's the second 4 parts. Then they were
Hmm.
going to do a similar thing for Life on Our Planet, but they actually decided not to do it in the end and keep the 8 together. Um, so we were kind of working alongside, and of course we have all these non-disclosure agreements now. You can't talk about anything. So of course
Yeah.
we knew that it was happening, and they knew that we were happening. We knew that they were sort of different things for different streamers. But yeah, it was so different. It wasn't really, you can't really compare, other than the VFX, you can't really compare the stories. They're so different in their messaging and their narrative.
Yeah.
And they both came out of Bristol, so we're quite proud of that that fact.
Yeah. No, it's something similar happened with another series. My friend and my cinematographer, he worked on it. It's the Apple series Becoming You, which is about the world of kids and babies, which is a great series, by the way. And I think similar something came out from Netflix too. So I think there's always that overlap. Sometimes those things have been happening for the longest time. As far as I can remember from the 90s, there's two Meteor movies, two End of the World movies, and all that stuff. So they're different. They're all different. The idea is the same, but they go in a completely different path, which is good for the audience too.
Do you know there was even the very first film I worked on that I was saying, the Meerkat film. It was
Which
funny,
one, sorry?
the Meerkat film, which was it was Harvey
Yeah.
Weinstein. It was the Weinstein Company and BBC Films, and BBC Studio, not studios, that didn't exist then. It was BBC Drama. Anyway, there were two identical Meerkat films being made, one by Animal Planet, who owned the Meerkat Manor brand, and then the BBC had made this separate film. And we were, again, filming 100 kilometers from each other down the road, both not
Oh
allowed
wow.
to talk to, not, we weren't allowed to talk to each other. We knew that both films were happening. And then in the end, the Weinsteins bought the other one. And I don't think it was ever even shown. So that's Hollywood
Oh
for you.
wow. Yeah. Yep. That is Hollywood for sure. Wow, that is interesting. I actually asked this question from somebody once on my podcast. I'm like, why? I don't know if you remember, but back in the 90s, there was a Deep Impact and Armageddon that came out like a month or two apart from Disney and DreamWorks. There was Volcano movies, Dante's Peak with Pierce Brosnan, and Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones. And I asked somebody like, why? How does this happen? Like, why? Like, do studios start racing after the other just for audience? And he said that I forget who it was. It was like a cinematographer, an editor, or a producer. He told me that at some of the parties, somebody would mention an idea, hey, I'm working on this or I'm developing this, and then somebody would take that and pitch it to the other, and then it just kind of goes from there, and it becomes like two, three different studios working on almost the same thing.
Yeah, a seed becomes two separate trees. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. One thing about nature documentaries, I'm a huge nature buff myself. Like I love traveling to very scenic places. I've done like I'll always take my gear with me. I'll take a drone, I'll fly. Like it's just something that I totally love and I absolutely fall in love with. Um, and a lot of that, you know, nature cinematography or whatever you want to call it, photography drives for me. It drove from watching stuff like Planet Earth, or the early documentary series, just capturing nature, the time lapses and all that. And filmmaking itself is it was one of those things where you have to have significant patience, complete patience. But nature, documentaries, I mean, that's like another level of patience and, fighting through weathers or conditions, whether it's blisteringly cold or extremely hot. How do you cope with something like that and, being there not just once, but several times over a span of months or years to recapture, to get another angle? How do you deal with that?
I guess it stems from the fact that the starting point is enjoying that in the first place. So
Mm,
I'd say that majority, if not all of the people in our industry, really love just being outside in the wilds of nature, watching it and observing it and looking at animals and sort of being absorbed in it. And there's something really beautiful. I remember when I was working with the meerkats, and you're sat with, because science can be really boring and slow too, right? Like
yeah.
collecting data. And with the meerkats, we'd be following them every day, collecting data on them. But sometimes you'd be waiting for the meerkats. It's so hot and they lie down during the middle of the day. And so you lie down under a tree waiting for them to move. And you're so still that all the wildlife around you, get these antelope, these deer, giraffes, rhinos, and they just kind of wander past you and they don't know you're there. They haven't detected you, haven't seen you. And there's something beautiful about a window into that world where you're not the predator human.
Mm,
You feel like it's a magical moment where you feel like you're watching nature as if it would be without humans existing. Because obviously, as soon as they know you're there, it influences their behavior, unless they're really habituated to humans and not scared of them. And so I guess it stemmed really from that kind of addiction to the sort of being immersed in nature. But then add to that the craft of documentary filmmaking. And like you say, it's got so high now in what we do. The bar is so high of obtaining these incredible shots in incredible light and incredible moments and behaviors that have never been seen before, filmed before. And so it is a bit like the Holy Grail. You are always chasing that, and you're always trying to strive to do better, film better, do it like no one's ever done it before. And so I guess it's just that sort of drive within the profession, really. And then you're combining those two things. You're combining the kind of storytelling producer side of things with the technical cinematography side of things with then the wildlife, and it's just a really intoxicating mix of worlds that is just so engaging. I mean, I could sit all day in nature and watch it and tune into the bird song and the alarm calls and the predators walking past, and yeah, it's an amazing thing. And also just taking such inspiration from the little creatures in front of you. Like I remember in Antarctica watching penguins climbing up a hill, and these are birds that are incredibly agile in the water, but on land they have to come ashore to breed every year, and they're a little bit, they're tiny with these waddly paddle-like feet, and they're going up the hill, and it's this huge hill in Antarctica with like snow
mm,
and slippy and icy, and they're falling down, and some of them have been attacked by leopard seals. So they've got these whole blood everywhere and just holes, their guts hanging out, and yet they still go, they still march, they still don't let that affect them, and they kind of trudge their way sort of one step at a time, and they beat us, like they're quicker than us up those hills. So it's amazing. I take great inspiration from those characters as well.
yeah, like you said, failure is something that teaches you to move forward, right? And it's not an option for you to stop. And it's funny you mentioned that, in storytelling, whether you're doing wildlife documentary, any documentary, social, political, food, or even narrative film, I find I find it really interesting that I learn so much from the stories that I'm making and the characters that are in there, and the perseverance that they're going through. I'm like, okay, who am I? Like, and it's funny that you're making this film, but you're learning so much from these people or these characters or these animals, and it's just a fascinating circle of life.
Mm. And that's the thing. It's a beautiful thing about documentary filmmaking. No matter what, you throw yourself into that world, don't you? And I love life on our planet was exponential in terms of a learning curve. I mean, I did read zoology at
Yeah.
university, but you don't cover evolution in the level of detail that we did. And so the first thing you do when you're given a show to make is, yeah, there's a rough structure, but you kind of chuck it out the window when you get on board, and you're like, right, how do we tell the story? This is the time period I've been given. And you just go into just reading everything, educating yourself on every single asset so that you, every single facet, so that you can pick out and weave your narrative story through all this literature, and how do you make it relatable, how do you make it entertaining, how do you all these amazing things that you've learned and discovered, how do you tell that to an audience? Because that's the exciting part for me. It's like Lycan on program 3, I was like, do you know, any executive producer, when you tell them you're going to open a show on Lycan, is going to think you're mad and you're nuts, and you know, it won't sustain, it's boring, blah blah blah. But I see it as my job to make it interesting and exciting and relevant. And you know, that was a real challenge on the opening of episode 3, to start with lichen going into sort of moss and ferns and making that engaging. But I love it because it's relatable, and everyone can look out their window and see lichen. I mean, you can see it, I can see it here on the stone faces of the building, like, and that thing was one of the first, it's not one species, it's 2, and it was one of the first combination of species to make its way out of the oceans. And I just think that's remarkable. It's an amazing thing, and I wanted to sort of tell people about it, and in a really visual way that kind of amazes them and inspires them and excites them. So I love it. I love the challenge of that, and
Yeah.
hopefully that was something that people will learn and remember.
Yeah, no, I learned a lot. I mean, even my kids, they were watching it. Well, I made them watch the first episode. They're like, we've already seen Prehistoric Planet. I'm like, no, this is different. And they watched the first episode, and then I had to do the rest on the plane because I was traveling. And then I found out that they're on episode 5 on their own. So, you know, they're 13 and 11. So it's not like something, you know, they kind of just took it on their own. So what you try to do is has worked, I'm sure, beyond, you know, people that you can imagine. And what's interesting about this series is, from your angle, I mean, it's different in the sense that you're dealing with there's a lot of stuff that's obviously real, and there's a lot of stuff that's visual effects. That learning curve, I'm assuming you probably didn't do anything of that nature before to that level. Is that correct to assume?
0, yeah.
So what was that like? Because obviously there's storyboarding involved and the movement of cameras, knowing exactly what's going to go animated in there. What was that like? Please run that by me.
Yeah, well, my partner actually is Jamie McPherson, and he was the cinematographer and VFX director of photography on the series. And so you can imagine, like, if you're together, you live and breathe it, right? Even every night, every morning, we talked about it. And what was interesting was we had to look back at Jamie's footage that he'd shot from the hunt, and you know, he's one of the top wildlife camera operators, and so we'd look at his rushes and be like, okay, what makes his rushes A stand out, but B organic and real and visceral and feel like you're there? And we kind of studied what the little camera decisions are in camera and the imperfections in a shot, that, you know, because the animal, you don't know what the animal's going to do. I mean, you can guess what the animal's going to do, but you're sort of reacting to how the animal behaves. And so we kind of looked at his footage, we spoke to, because ILM had never worked in this way either before. ILM, you know, it was new for them. And so we all sat down a year before we shot anything, and we just talked about, okay, how do we do this? What camera angles? What are the rules that we're going to put in place? Like, so we decided that we wanted to film it as we would. It's got to sit alongside natural history as well, which is very difficult because it puts natural history under a lot of scrutiny. The VFX under a lot of scrutiny. And so we decided that we try and shoot where possible on long lens to give it that compressed look that you get, the sort of 50 to 1,000 Canon lens that we use for a lot of wildlife documentaries. It's a very good sequence building lens because you can obviously pick up a lot of different shot sizes. When you get single one-off behavioral moments, it's a great lens for that. So you can change shot sizes so you have cut points. So we pretty much use that lens for most of the sequences. And so we put rules in place that enabled it to have all the fabric and design of what a wildlife shoot would have. And then we had Jamie there to sort of have that consistency of look and style that he brings to it. So that all the VFX backplates, everything is shot by Jamie, and it's all real world environments. That was another important decision. Like, do we go CG like Jungle Book that's 100% VFX, or do we go, let's film as much of the plate as we possibly can and then just put the creatures into that? And I think actually that gives it a very much more visceral feeling. It's much more organic feeling to the shots, and it helps embed those creatures, I think, better than if we'd chosen to just go down the 100% CG route. So there was a lot of working it out, sort of testing new methods out. We even had Jamie bought like the whole cast of plastic. I think there'll be some making of snippets coming out in the next week or so about it, but we had little plastic dinosaurs, and we would, instead of, it was much quicker process than storyboarding. So with his iPhone, he would be doing tracking shots, and we'd move them around with little bits of paper on the desk, and we'd map all out, and then we'd actually edit with those as well. So we were able to do the pre-visualization again in a very untraditional way, that is not sort of normal to the process. And because we didn't have endless amounts of money, obviously, you know, we couldn't change. Jonathan's the VFX supervisor at IVM, and he was like, look,
Yeah.
you can't change your minds. You know, once you've edited the story, that is it. You have to stick to that, and you can't just make a creature and then change your mind. He said in Hollywood that happens all the time. They'll get down, they'll have done all the VFX shots, and then someone comes in and says, no, I don't like that, you know, you need to change the entire look of that character or whatever. And he's like, you can't afford that. You're going to have to work out what your story is, work out what your shots are, and go and shoot that and stick to that. But that's fine, because we were kind of used to working like that anyway with natural history. You know, we can't change the shots that we come back with from a shoot. It either happens or it doesn't happen. So we were kind of used to that way of thinking. But it was a huge learning curve for all of us.
I'm actually speaking to Jonathan in 2 hours or hour and a half. So I'll be talking to him about the VFX. But you know, going back to I remember it was Planet Earth. I think it was the second one. Have you seen Planet Earth 2?
Yes.
The one okay.
Yeah.
So there's a very popular sequence of the snakes and the iguanas, the chase. So they shot that over 2 years. They had to go back and, you know, redo some of the inserts and some of the cuts with different chases, and they just kind of put that together. With the real stuff that you capture, the real animals, not necessarily the dinosaurs or prehistoric creatures, was there any time that you had to go back to get inserts of a similar sequence, just because something was missing, or was there anything like that?
It has certainly in the past. I remember on Our Planet, when we made that series, there was a Caribou migration story that they had to go back for because they just didn't have the number. You know, that, so it's not a thing that isn't unheard of. However, on this series, it was slightly different. We weren't chasing so much. Like when you're working on these big landmarks, normally the holy grail is like, right, new behavior, something that's never been seen before, or raise the bar, or new species. We weren't really so much chasing that, if you know what I mean. We were actually telling this bigger story. So we were picking actually the more representative behaviors in order to show the evolution, or tell the evolutionary story. And so therefore we could pick behaviors that we knew happened. Also COVID was another one. Our whole production schedule was squeezed into such a short filming window that we just didn't have the opportunity to go back and redo things. So there are definitely sequences that hit the cutting room floor. I remember for program 8 we went to film desert owls, and no one had ever filmed desert owls before. They actually nest on the ground, not in trees, and it was a nice example to show the adaptation of owls to the desert. But the sequence just didn't have enough behavior. It just didn't work, and so we ended up cutting that sequence from the film and never saw the light of day. So I guess there's those sorts of things that happen. But yeah, I'd say this series, it wasn't so much about going back to get stuff as maybe other series might be.
Yeah,
what we do.
I think sometimes that's a blessing, regardless of what you're doing, is if you know there's no option of redoing it. Just like shooting on film versus digital. You know, when you're shooting on digital, you know you can redo the takes because there's no, you know, film processing fee or negatives and stuff. But on film, you're just kind of like limited. Okay, this is what I gotta do. So sometimes restrictions sometimes can be beneficial in trying to drive the best out of you.
Yeah, the pressure, I guess.
Yeah.
I did do the Meerkat film was filmed, so I have experienced shooting on film for one project.
Yeah, I know. I miss film, watching film, just the feel of it. Like anytime I see real grain on the big screen, like I feel like I'm literally touching that grain, and it's just such a phenomenal thing. And I know, I mean, with things that, technology, everything changes, and I'm obviously reaping a benefit of the digital technology myself, but it's sometimes good to watch that, but sadly it's, kind of going away.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think for us, it's people just love to see nature, and when you go into shops to buy televisions, it's
yeah,
always nature. I don't know if it's the same in the States or Canada, but in England, you go into a television shop and it has Planet Earth up, because it just looks so good and crisp and clear and vivid, doesn't it? And
yeah.
so I guess that certainly, I think with what we do, there's the drive, whereas the more filmic look, I don't know, might look like it's out of focus a bit or something.
Yeah, yeah, no, for wildlife documentaries, 100%. I was talking about like films like, like Jurassic Park, Oppenheimer, the films that we grew up watching and are watching right now. That's what I was referring to.
Yeah.
But speaking of Jurassic Park, I mean, it must be really cool to have your name attached to a project which has the name executive producer Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, that's a dream, isn't it? I mean,
It is for everybody, including myself.
yeah, I mean, of course I grew up with that film. I mean, it just inspired so many people to get into dinosaurs, T-Rex. There's just so much about it. And
Yeah.
it was when we got the first feedback, we were so nervous before we sent anything off the very first time to Stephen. And I remember he's so busy, so we would send him things for review rather than sort of necessarily direct conversations with him. But I remember we got it back from Amblin, who the executives at Amblin, and said, right, Stephen's seen it and he loves it. And we were just like, oh, it was the Lystrosaurus sequence. And it was just like, oh my God, like we were expecting to be like, have real harsh criticism and it to be like, but he just, no, he absolutely loved it. He thought the animation was brilliant and the models were really great. And so, yeah, that was a scary moment, but one that kind of luckily it was all Stephen approved it so we could move on, which was nice.
That's lovely. That's amazing to hear. And it's, I've heard that before so many times. Everybody's like, we sent it to Steven and we were really scared and it came back, but like we loved it, he loved it. And I think for him, I think the biggest thing is, aside from anything, is the storytelling, which should be a prime focus of everyone. And if he sees the story is carrying the film, then, obviously the visual effects with ILM, he's dealt with ILM all his life. So yeah, kudos to you. Kudos to you. That's amazing. That's amazing
Yeah.
on cherry on top.
Yeah, well, like you say, I think from day one Amblin and Stephen were, for that very reason, the story was so strong in this series, and they were really excited by that actually, because I think they learned a lot.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. Um, were you involved in post for the episodes that you directed?
Yeah. So everything from conception right through to
Right.
completion. Yeah.
And as far as the narration is concerned, obviously, it's there throughout the entire series. Um, was it a series showrunner that was sort of managing that aspect, or were each directors dealing with the delivery or with the pacing of Morgan Freeman's narration?
We were there. I was there for the com record with Morgan. We had in Natural History, we kind of, the producer directors write the films. They do everything. They sort of write the films. They go into the com record. They fit the com. They decide. They sit with the composer and talk to the composer about pacing this, write cue sheets. So yeah, we're across every element and design of the show. Of course, we did have Dan Tapster, who was the series producer slash showrunner for this,
Mm-hmm.
and he was instrumental in kind of keeping the massive story across all 8 episodes like strong and cohesive. And also he was really great at making sure there was a cohesive style across it. And we brought a script editor on to just kind of polish our scripts to make sure that because we all write in slightly different ways, and so there was that consistency. It was Dan and him basically helped create more of a consistency, I'd say, than is normal in natural history. So that was another unique thing about this project, I guess, is that a lot of effort went into making it cohesive across the 8 parts, and not just what we're used to doing, which is individual filmmakers making their film within a series, and they can all be slightly different, which is usually a good thing when it's something like Our Planet, because you want that variety of kind of,
Yep.
I mean, it's still obviously a cohesive series, but it's a bit more variety between the producers. Whereas this one, I think, because the connective tissue between it was so great, and we worked really hard on the end of one show to get you into the start of the next.
Yeah.
And that, again, that was Dan Tapster was really great at driving that and making sure that it was, I guess, hopefully bingeable, and like you want to know what happens next. And again, that's very hard to achieve in natural history normally, but because the story was so great with this one, I felt like that was a real success, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and I anticipated in the last episode that it would sort of talk about now, right? But what I didn't anticipate, which I'm not going to say just for people who haven't seen it, the very last frame of the show, of the series, the last episode, what it shows that, what could happen if things don't go the way they should be, if they keep going the way they are. So
Mm.
I know it paints a very not so, it completely contradicts visually from all the stuff that you've seen, but obviously there's a message, right? There's a call to action. Um, and I thought that was pretty powerful. Like the last frame was probably the most powerful thing in the entire series. Everything that led up from a spark of evolution to where we are today and where we could be tomorrow.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was, I mean, we actually cut the end of the last 15 minutes of the series. We were in the cutting room with that when the COVID lockdown pandemic thing happened, which was quite ironic. Because basically, we felt the end of the series is so important to get it right. And so I wanted to cut it way before we were due to actually edit the films. And so that had time to specially shoot everything and make it feel really poetic at the end and really important and give it value. And I also wanted to get it right because I didn't want to bash people over the head with a strong conservation message. I would much rather that, given what you've learned in the last 8 hours, you've learned a hell of a lot about evolution, about extinction, about the past and how that informs the future and the present. And I wanted people to start to connect that up for themselves. And so I didn't want to sort of hit people over the head with it, that I feel like some people are maybe be getting a little bit blind to it all because you just hear it all the time, right? And so I didn't want people to sort of turn off and be like, oh, here we go, here's the environmental messaging at the end. So it's important to sort of celebrate human achievement and what we are and what we've become, but the flip side to that being the damage that has created collectively. Not to point the finger at anything, but just humanity in general, really.
I get it.
And so, and also to frame it in the context of the past, because there's huge analogies. We know that when CO2 increases, like the Permian, what happens? And CO2 increases, you get global warming, you get climate change, and you get mass death. And that's essentially what we're doing, but we're doing it with meteoric speed. So we're doing it at the speed of this meteorite impact that wiped out the dinosaurs. We also know that, the dominant species, essentially us, go in this case, going into a mass extinction has never come out. And so I wanted to just people to reflect for themselves. I like to have an active, not a passive viewer at the end of a show. Like I like to sort of end on a question so that people are sat there thinking, or they're outraged, or they're incensed, or they're emotional or something, so that you turn to the person next to you and you have a chat about it and a conversation about it, and it incites you to kind of think for yourself. And that's exactly what I was trying to get at the end of the series. I wanted people to be thinking for themselves, not to be feeling like they're lectured, but it was more like, here's the tools, here's the information, here's the education, now draw your own conclusions from that.
And you did really well with that. But first of all, it wasn't in your face, like, here we go, here comes a message. That wasn't there at all. Like, I just didn't feel it in any way. And the second thing that I actually enjoyed, like you just said in the word, that the conversation, and that's something that I cherish as myself when I'm telling stories, is that I want people to get out of the movie theater or, streaming service or wherever it is have a discussion, have a conversation, because that's what we're lacking so much nowadays. Every freaking thing that's going wrong in the world is because of lack of conversation. And And I don't know about climate change and global warming destroying us the way things are in the world right now. I think we're going to destroy ourselves first before that even happens. But nevertheless, phenomenally done series, episodes. I did want to tap into one thing, and I wonder if that was ever discussed or it was never on the table. There is always conversation between science versus religion. How did life start, right? The scientists will argue that it started with a spark of, that's how life started with a spark. Though, who created the spark? Like, where is there a divine power? Was that ever something a part of a conversation to even tackle in the series or to even bring it up, religion versus science, or was it completely something separate
uh it wasn't a consideration. Was that a bad
at
thing?
all?
Not really.
No, I'm just curious.
I'd say that the majority, if not all of us, come from that scientific background, and I think it's also, how do you get into that, and which religion would you represent? I think it would have
No,
been a
no,
can of worms.
yeah.
And
Not religion. I was just talking about where did life come from before this. Just a question, not even preaching. I
mm,
wasn't. I was just asking in general because it is. I mean, it obviously requires a series on its own. To be honest, like it's such a huge topic that I
yeah,
mean, forget religion versus science now. Religion versus religions are in disagreement, right? So it's a different thing. I was just curious because I think it's a fascinating discussion. I would love to have it. I'd love to see it on a streaming service once with a massive um, outreach and just try to see where it leads.
yeah. I mean, it's
Conversation.
how hard to visualize. What would you
It is.
show?
It is.
It's difficult.
It
It's
is.
but it is yeah, it is going rewinding the clock even further back is definitely an interesting area. And I'm sure there's a lot of science, about it. It boils down to physics and chemistry, probably, doesn't it? About where the atoms come from and what space is and what time is and all those things. I think it would be the fabric of the universe, and yeah, maybe a bit too broad for our
Oh no, no. I'm
our
not
remit.
even I'm not even asking that you should have done. I was just curious. I'm just I love making conversations and asking questions that I don't even know the answers to. So, it's just trying to figure out if that was ever on the table, which is absolutely fine because like I said, it's a series on its own. Um, what's what's in store for you in the future? Are you working on anything right now?
I am waiting for the next project. It's on the precipice of commission, and I probably won't be able to talk
That's
to you about it
fine.
for another 5 years
Yeah.
anyway. But no, it's yeah, there's some exciting new projects coming up. But I really personally, I've really enjoyed this blend of worlds. Like, I think it's a really exciting development or new genre, really, of this sort of blend of VFX and the power to tell stories that we couldn't really tell so well before. And so I'm excited about where that's going to take natural history in the future, because I think there are a lot of stories that have not been able to be told because of the visuals are too risky, or it would cost too much money. I'm not saying to replace like what you could go out and film. I'm thinking of kind of concepts or things about evolution or biology that are very hard to get across visually, and now we have the power to do that with animation. So I think it's quite an exciting new format slash genre, actually, that we could see some really creative things coming in the next decade or so, coming out of this sort of new world of CG complementing the natural world. It's exciting times.
Would you be concerned or are you concerned with the way AI is moving and in a decade's time? I mean, okay, so let me put it this way. 20 years ago, or even 25 years ago, we couldn't have imagined the amount of doc series on nature there are, like whether it's in the wilderness or the abyss of the ocean. 10, 15 years from now, what if AI could create every single thing that we go out and shoot, especially in this sector, like wildlife? Do you feel that is a possibility, especially with now that the series that you worked on, I mean, they were computer generated prehistoric creatures.
Mm. No, yeah, I mean, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on AI and the future and what's going to happen, and it is frightening.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think people sort of say, oh, but we can use it. And I'm like, yeah, we can use it until it uses us. Like, I can't imagine a future happening that it's not, AI is not going to become its own thing. And I think it's frightening from a point of view of what is real and what isn't real, and the power of
Yeah.
that, fake news. I think it's going to hit the sort of
Oh yeah.
world of news before it hits our world per se. But no, I definitely think it's going to be interesting to see where that leads. And just even the mimicry of people's voices, the mimicry of like narration, the mimicry. I kind of initially, I guess, naively thought, oh, well, we're creative industry, AI can't be creative, and then you look at these pictures when you tell them to dream up a scene from the 1970s with X, Y, and Z in it, and then it comes up with it and it's photoreal and it looks like a picture, and you're like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
there is cause for concern. I think it would be ignorant to think there isn't cause for concern, to be honest.
No, and I think
But
we're all part of it too, right? Because, for example, not at a bigger level, but even at a smaller level, everybody's trying to save money, right? Whether it's for production and especially for independent filmmakers. Okay, so for example, if I have to make a deck about something that I have $0 to go out and shoot to make a deck of or take photographs of, okay, punch it into, AI, generate me an image. And then if that starts happening, which it is, I did it once. I took it to a streaming platform and I'm like, well, obviously I want to do this, but I had to because I had no choice. If that becomes a norm with ChatGPT and other stuff. And then Netflix also made a short animated film, which I haven't seen, which is completely AI generated. Um, with what's to say that visual effects artists' jobs, animators' jobs, our jobs, are probably at the last in the end of the line, but still it's scary. It is very scary.
yeah, it's terrifying. And it's probably not far away, is it? I mean,
No. I mean, could you have imagined ChatGPT last year around this time? It's pretty much came out in November last year. Imagine in 1 year, look what has happened. It's crazy the speed. It's not just what's coming out, it's the speed it's coming out at.
well, the guy, I was listening to a podcast about the guy that left Google X,
Yes.
and he said the turning point for him, the reason he left, and he realizes they had a room with lots of robotic arms in it, and they had balls on the floor, and they just let the arms try an algorithm, see if it came back, show it to the camera, did it have a ball? No. And so it had a feedback loop happening. Did it pick up a ball? Yes or no? No. And it never picked up a ball. None of the arms in that room ever picked up a ball. And then he talking back from lunch one day, and one arm had done it, had picked up a ball and shown it to the camera, and it got a positive result. Within the next few hours, the entire room was picking up the ball every single time. And so he just said what was frightening was the speed of learning and the fact that it could, because obviously it would then pass that algorithm to the rest of them all and then modify the algorithms and make sure, he just said it was just a real, it doesn't sound like much, but it was a real pivotal moment for him in realizing the speed at which that information and the learning could be passed on to a community of robotics. And it's, yeah, he said that was a huge thing that he didn't think was
That's
possible.
that sounds like a scene from a typical sci-fi movie, like when you're trying to make an invention and you go out for lunch and you come back and boom, something has happened. That is scary. But one thing that I hope for is that when people, not just in the art industry or anything, like, whether it's being a carpenter or I don't know, being a doctor, there will always be a demand, maybe not to the same place. Like, once, like, for example, visual effects came out since Jurassic Park, and now everybody's kind of going back to the practical effects. Like, they want to shoot everything in the camera. And I hope that the speed that the AI becomes part of all our lives, at that same speed, if not faster, people start realizing that I want the real elements. Whether it's a real doctor or real storyteller telling a story. But, it remains to be seen. That's what I hope for, and that's what I'm counting on.
Yeah, well, it won't be long before AI has its own voice and it's
Yeah.
producing documentaries for us to watch.
Yes. Yes. There's actually an interesting, I don't know if you must have seen it on social media. There was a robot, like a physical robot, life-size robot, playing table tennis with a guy. And he would just move from one corner to the other in ridiculous speed. I mean, I didn't even see the end of the video, and I'm assuming he didn't lose because it was like a 3 minute long rally. And he for him it's like nothing. Like there's no muscle stretching, there is no pain on the shoulder or anything like that, right? Uh, it's great to watch. I won't
Yeah.
lie, but it's scary at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, I think it would be funny to look back in 50 years' time and think, I remember when we were just laughing at AI because it could play us at table tennis. Yeah.
Yes, yes, agreed.
Mm.
Great. Well, this has been really fascinating. Thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time, Sophie. I would love to talk to you more about your past projects. So if there is anything that is very dear to you, I'm sure it's like asking which children is more favorite of yours, but very dear to you that you want to chat about, just let me know and we'll do it because I truly had a great time talking to you. I loved the work you did in the series
Oh, thank you.
and would love to see more of your work for sure.
Oh, thank you. Well, we didn't even get on to talking about Walrus, so that might be one for another time.
No, for sure. When did that come out?
It was Our Planet, and it was the walrus falling off the cliffs. I don't know if you remember seeing that.
I don't.
Yeah,
I gotta revisit that.
you need to watch Frozen Worlds, the Our Planet episode, and if you don't cry at the end of that film, it's
Our
horrendous.
Planet. It's on
Yeah,
Netflix, right?
yeah, Frozen Worlds. It's the second episode.
You did just one episode or you did multiple?
I just did that one. That was the first film I ever made. So yeah,
That's a great angle. Okay, great. Let's do that. Maybe I'll watch it sometime the next couple of weeks and
yeah,
perhaps we can chat before Christmas or in the new year.
yeah. It's quite shocking. I think comes with a rating.
Don't don't tell me anything.
Yeah,
Don't tell me. I'll watch it, but I'm really looking forward to it. Not for the reasons of watching someone dying or some animal dying, but just from the standpoint of storytelling.
yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's always lovely to chat about in more detail than because you don't get the opportunity to chat that often about the details of the craft. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. And do come back for another episode. Until then, have a great day.